Hello and good evening. Díobh go léir agus fáilte. I'm joined here this evening by three of our leading spokespersons, by David Cullinan, our spokesperson on health, by Claire Curran, our spokesperson on social protection, and by Pauline Tully, who's our spokesperson on carers and disability. And we're here to tell you about the motion that we're bringing to the Dáil on Wednesday, a motion that is all about caring and family carers. And it has very specific asks of government, things that need to be delivered, because as we all know, family carers are so often forgotten, and yet they are people who carry an incredible amount of the caring that's done right across our state, indeed right across our country. So we want to begin by recording our appreciation to you, the family carers of Ireland. We salute you, and more importantly, we support you. So what we want to do is set out for you some of the main parts of this motion that we're bringing. And the motion, by the way, will be put to a vote. So every TD will have the opportunity to support what we're going to set out for you now. I'll start with you, David Cullinan, just on that issue of vaccination for family carers.
Thank you, Mary Lou. And yeah, first of all, to say that the motion itself will focus in on what's needed for carers, and carers have had a very tough time during this pandemic, as many sections of society had. And we know that carers do huge amount of work, caring for people, saving the state huge amounts of money every year, and they don't feel recognised and they don't feel respected and valued for the work that they do. So our motion focuses on income supports for carers. It also focuses on services that carers need, but also the people who they care for. And obviously one of the issues that came into sharp focus over the last number of weeks and months was the need for carers to be vaccinated. And we have certainly been pushing that case, because they are patient facing. They are people who are doing huge work in their communities, in their homes, looking after very vulnerable people. And I think it's disgraceful that months on from their campaign, supported by Family Carers Ireland, and despite the fact that many politicians in government have also been writing to carers and saying that we want to support you as well, there still has been no action whatsoever. And I think that's unacceptable. So in this motion, again, we're calling for family carers to be recognised as a distinct cohort for the purposes of rolling out the vaccine. And all of the carers we spoke to, Mary Lou, are not looking to jump the queue. They're not looking to take vaccines from anybody else. They want to be treated fairly. They want to be treated equally. They want to be seen as a distinct cohort, which they should be. And when you look at the distinction that was made by the government, that carers who work for the HSE were prioritised, and rightly so, but family carers were not, that is plainly wrong. And that needs to be corrected. And what we are calling for is the government to right what is a clear wrong. And we strongly, obviously, support the demand coming from carers and Family Carers Ireland. So this motion is wide-ranging. It covers a lot of issues. We want to see this motion as part of a fight back for carers. We're standing up for their needs. We need to make sure that full packages and measures and supports are put in place for family carers, because for far too long they have been left behind, despite all of the work that they do, and despite the tea and sympathy that they often get from political parties and governments. They don't get the recognition that they deserve. And a very small recognition would be that they would be recognised as a group for the purposes of the vaccine rollout. It is within the grasp of the government and the National Immunisation Advisory Committee to do that, to make that recommendation, and we will continue to push the case until it happens.
Thanks so much for that, David. And we know this is a huge issue for carers, and many of you asked a very obvious question: well, what happens if I get sick? You know, so keeping the family carer safe is about the carer themselves, but it's also about the person who's being cared for. So thanks very much for that, Dave. So that's one of the key demands of this motion, that family carers are recognised and given their place in the order of priority for vaccination. But we also, Claire, and I'll come to you on this, we deal with the issue of income supports, because we know that this is absolutely central for family carers as well. And we've heard from so many of them, Claire, haven't we, about just the financial struggle that it is. I mean, it's heartbreaking, very many of the stories we've heard. So our motion goes to the heart of that as well, Claire.
Yeah, absolutely, Mary Lou. And I think the important and unique thing about carers is that in order to get the income support, you have to be working full time. One of the main criteria is that you have to be providing full-time care. Yet the rates for carers allowance are quite stagnant. For the carers allowance, which is the means tested payment, carers are usually, and more than half of the carers on the carers allowance are on a reduced rate. So straight away, we know that the means test is having a huge impact on carers. And the main reason for that, of course, is because the earnings disregard, the income disregard has not moved since 2008. And that is leaving carers in a really precarious position in relation to their income supports. The government have had years and years, they've had opportunity after opportunity to increase the earnings disregard. In the budget before last, they increased the hours that carers could work or study outside the home from 15 hours to 18 and a half. So they told carers, you can work outside the home more, but if you earn more, your carers allowance is impacted. So they were really put in a precarious position in relation to that. The carers support grant, that is a payment of €1,850. We had put forward late last year in the social welfare bill that payment be made in 2 payments this year for 2021. That was a call by Family Carers Ireland. It would have meant a payment of €925 in January, and that would have at least acknowledged and recognised the real difficult year that carers have had. But again, the government turned that down. So those supports that are so important really haven't been there, and the income supports are they're really inadequate, and they haven't moved. The rates haven't moved. They're not meeting even an adequate standard of living for carers. And when the vast majority of them are on a reduced rate, alarm bells should be ringing. So we really need to see all of the measures in relation to income supports be part of this new national carer strategy. And in fairness to carers, the last time we had that strategy in 2012, there was an understanding that the country was in financial hardship. Carers stood back, and this is well acknowledged, and they said, we'll wait, and they're waiting since. So the new strategy needs to include all of these commitments, with the exception of the vaccine, which needs to be absolutely immediate. But our social protection system needs to protect carers. It needs to provide them with an adequate income that allows them to care. And for those who want to work or study outside the home, they should be able to do that without being as financially penalised as they are now.
Thanks so much, Karen. It's worth recording in the midst of all of that family carers save the state some €20 billion every year. Isn't that right? So their work and their care is valuable. In fact, we would say invaluable. And it's high time that the state responds to the fact that very many carers are just barely making it. Some of them, to be frank, aren't making it financially. So Claire, thanks for that. And indeed for all of your work on that area, because I know you've been toiling away on these issues now for a very long time. So thanks for that, Claire. And Pauline, just to highlight one of the other elements of the motion, which is around the issue of respite, because as David was saying earlier, it's been just an incredibly hard year for everyone. But my God, family carers have really been through the mill. So we're very anxious on this point of respite. And I know, Pauline, in the course of your work, this is something that you're meeting day and daily from families, from people with disabilities and from family carers.
Yes, Mary Lou, it is something that's coming up on a regular basis. I mean, the provision of respite was, we say, patchy and sketchy, to say the least, even pre-COVID. And then it was suspended, like all the services were suspended a year ago. And where it has resumed, it's on a very limited capacity. And many carers are telling me, even where they are booked in for respite, next thing it's cancelled at short notice because an emergency arises. So I think provision of respite has to increase. where emergency cases are catered for without interrupting what's been booked, for carers as it is. And I also think it needs to be modelled to meet the needs of the particular family, because one size doesn't fit all. I mean, some families are looking for maybe weekend or week-long respite in a respite centre. But for others, that's not possible. And they may want in-home respite, where somebody will come into the home and give them just a few hours break. And this is particularly arises where there are very complex needs, and perhaps the main carer cannot be away from, perhaps a child that needs to be tube fed or something like that. So, to look at the whole area of respite is a huge issue and something that's very important. And I suppose along with that, in supports in general just need to be improved, and access to information around what supports are there, including income supports, needs to be made available to carers instead of them having to go looking for information every time on what they should be entitled to. It should be provided to them in a pack practically when they become a carer. That and training is another issue that comes up quite regularly as well, so to prepare them for the difficulties that they're going to face.
Thanks very much for that, Pauline. So those are some of the key elements of the motion that we're bringing. It'll be debated on Wednesday, and our senior spokespersons here, David and Claire and Pauline, will be leading out on this. But this is a motion that is of concern and value to all of us. And look, last week we heard stories of the state holding files and dossiers on children with autism and on their families, because the families stepped up and we're taking legal action against the state. I think we were all shocked by that, although perhaps some weren't hugely surprised by it, because the experience of people with disabilities for their families and their carers has been that it has been an ongoing battle with the state. That should not be the case. It's the state's job to support and vindicate the rights of every citizen, including citizens with disabilities, their carers and their families. So this motion is important because it makes that point very strongly, and it's an opportunity for all of us, every elected representative, to step onto that ground and to make that clear and to support that idea of including and recognising carers and those that they care for. And last week also we had the whole controversy and outrage around the dispensing of the vaccines, spare vaccines, if you don't mind, at the Beacon Clinic, and the outrage naturally around that, and the sheer unfairness of family carers, for example, as a group not even being recognised in the order of priority at a time where vaccines can be dispensed in this way by individuals to contacts that they have, is completely wrong, we all know, and unacceptable. So it's very important that that programme is gotten right, and as David Cullinan has articulated many times, that family carers are on that order of priority. So these are big issues. Friends, thank you for tuning in with us this evening. If you feel that you want to, please absolutely feel free to post your views or your experiences below this video. Keep an eye to the debate in the Dáil on Wednesday, and perhaps most importantly of all, contact your political representatives, your local representatives, TDs, councillors, whether they're opposition or government, and tell them that carers cannot wait. Ask them who cares for the carers. Tell them that this motion is coming up on Wednesday and that you expect them to support it. Ramaya, thank you for being with us, and we'll talk to you soon.